In this episode, I sit down with big wave surfer, writer, mother, and stage 4 cancer thriver, Melanie Ezell, to talk about how the ocean carried her through eating disorders, divorce, diagnosis, and the wild, ordinary magic of motherhood. If you have ever felt lost, burnt out, or afraid of what comes next, this conversation is for you. There wasn't enough time to cover all of Melanie's story here, but this one is going to inspire you. Thank you so much for listening to One Breath Conversations Below the Surface, a podcast exploring how the ocean transforms lives and shapes identity. This podcast was born from my own journey as a surfer, freediver, photographer, and mother. I have experienced the undeniable pull of the ocean and wanted to create a space for conversations with other water people to explore how the ocean has shaped their journeys too. My hope is that we can inspire you all to reconnect with our natural world, explore our blue backyard, and make bold choices in your own lives. Hello and welcome back. Today, my guest is Melanie Ezell. She is a lifelong waterwoman, writer, and yoga teacher whose journey through big wave surfing, motherhood, and stage 4 cancer has deepened her reverence for the ocean, both as a teacher and a healer. Hi, Melanie.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so honored that you could make time in your schedule across oceans to speak with me. So are you originally from San Diego? Is that
I
correct?
actually grew up in Michigan and
Oh,
I moved to San Diego for graduate school and I live in Hawaii.
yeah, amazing. And was it your connection to the ocean that took you to Hawaii, or you're a yoga teacher as well?
Yeah, so I was in San Diego and I was teaching yoga full time. Actually, before I was teaching yoga, I was working in corporate America. I got a master's
Oh,
degree in math
wow.
and I was working for a software company. And right around that same time, I was learning to surf. And it ruined me. I when I moved, into this it was like 250 square feet, uh, I don't know what that is in meters, but very small beachfront shack, and bought my first surfboard and my first wetsuit. I was 27 years old, and I was like, "I'm gonna learn to surf." And I just couldn't go into an office anymore, and I couldn't sit under fluorescent lights and travel on airplanes and show up and give presentations, and I I I couldn't do it. So I quit my corporate job to teach yoga and do body work full time. And I did that for several years in San Diego until I reached kind of a meltdown in my life. And I can go more into that if you want to. But basically, I was working through an eating disorder and a divorce, and I was just broke. The yoga industry is a hard place to make money. So between all of that, I felt like my life was falling apart, and I had a lot of ideation and didn't want to get out of bed. But the only thing that was getting me out of bed was surfing. Even though I was this like beginner novice surfer, just barely able to even paddle out to the waves and go directional. It's all I wanted to do with my life. And I remember this day I had met this community of people and I was surfing with them every day, the same crew that shows up at same time, and I was part of that crew and I felt like I was a part of this thing that meant something. And it was one of those days when like the waves are glassy and everybody got a few good ones, and you paddle in and the sun is going down and someone opens a cooler full of beers and passes them around, and I was a couple beers in, and a friend of mine, I was just like, "Man, this is what I wanna do all the time. I don't wanna go back to work. I don't wanna do any of this life stuff. I just wanna be in the ocean." And my friend was like, "Oh, so you could just bail your life and go to Costa." And I was like, "Wait, what did you just say? I could bail my life and travel to Central America?" And and I started thinking on it, and it took me a few months, maybe like 6 months, to actually close up shop in every aspect of my life, and I started traveling and just living this surf safari lifestyle and teaching yoga and doing body work along the way, and that lasted about 3 years. But each time, I was traveling mostly in Mexico, and Mexico is on the Pacific coast where the waves are, and they get south swells. So then when it became north swell season, I still wanted to surf some warm water, and everyone that I met was like, "Well, we go to Hawaii for the winter." And so I was like, "Oh, well, I could try that." I didn't think that I would have the skill to be able to surf in Hawaii, but I had been to the North Shore of Oahu on a vacation once, and so I was familiar with it. And I was like, "Well, whatever. I can still enjoy that connection to the ocean." So I came for 3 winters before moving here full time.
Oh my goodness. Do you know what? Listening to you talk, first of all, I didn't know that about you. So, I think you and I, when I reached out to you, I was talking about, our connection, and I have followed you since, before your son was born, I think. And we were saying, I think, you were doing some writing. We've got a mutual friend who's originally from the UK. And so I think you documented surfing during your pregnancy. And I think that's maybe where I first started following you, and then have obviously followed your journey since then. But yeah, I didn't know that about you. And listening to what you were just saying, it's, you probably wouldn't have had time to listen, but I actually released an episode of the podcast this week, where I've interviewed an oceanographer and a surf forecaster from Australia that I met in the surf in Australia. And my journey is something kind of similar to yours, albeit different countries. And I sort of originally, I'm originally from the UK and came to Australia. I was working in corporate, picked up a surfboard, and then it's funny how, and I guess this is the motivation behind the conversations that I'm having about how this connection to the ocean transforms lives and identity. And it sort of seems to come into our lives when we need it most, and is sort of helping, again, all of the people I've spoken to, helping people through challenges, and whether that be mental health or physical. So it's so interesting to hear that from you. And also, you've ended up in Hawaii, big wave surf. And so you landed in Hawaii, and then were you teaching yoga there? And sort of what prompted you to settle? Was it the surf lifestyle?
So yeah, when I was in Mexico, when I was traveling, to back up a little bit, my car actually broke down. So I had driven from San Diego south, and I was just sort of surfing my way south, and my car broke down once in Acapulco, and I was learning to surf this big heavy beach break there while my transmission got rebuilt. And I thought it solved the problem until I got a few more hours down the road to Puerto Escondido, and then it just completely, I couldn't find a mechanic who could diagnose it, and I was stuck there for several weeks. And in the meantime, Puerto Escondido is kind of the big wave capital of Mexico, and Zicatela there, Mexican pipeline. And I was like this longboarder, just, with a couple years of experience. And I fell back into my depression big time. Like, what have I done with my life? I can't believe I left everything behind, because now I'm not even surfing and I don't have a car, and I don't speak the language. And then I saw this woman surf this massive wave at Puerto Escondido. And I watched her from the beach, and I had never seen a woman in a big wave situation before. I knew that, like, Maya was surfing over in Portugal, but I didn't think really real people did that, I guess. And then when I saw a real human female do it, it was Bianca Valeni. I was like, "Oh my god, if that's possible for someone, that's possible for me." And it unlocked, like, this victim story. Like, I saw the victim story that I was living in, and I wanted to take my power back. So I was like, I didn't consciously make that connection. All I knew was, I'm going to surf that place. I am going to surf big waves. So I started by just watching and photographing Zicatela for a couple of weeks. And then I went out with swim fins and just kind of body surfed, kind of just dove under waves to feel the power. And then I went out a couple days when it was small, kind of on the shoulder, and gradually worked my way up to being able to get some actual waves and some barrels and feel like I was doing it. Not well, but I was doing it. So when I got to Hawaii, I hired a coach, and I remember working with him for a few sessions. I was doing body work and teaching yoga. And the coach one day, I was watching Waimea break, and I had borrowed this big wave gun, and I was watching it break and thinking, you know what, that actually looks doable. Like maybe. But I didn't have the confidence in myself to know. So I texted my coach. I'm like, hey, based on what we've done together, what do you think? And what I know now is that when Waimea is small, I mean, there are kids as young as 8 and 9 years old out there that they're doing it. So even though it's a 20-foot face, it's very doable because you have this big, massive channel. It's more about the confidence, right?
Oh, look, so I'm a longboarder, so I did want to jump in there. At what point did you transition off the longboard, or was it just a transition from a longboard to a gun because you're riding such big waves?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I kinda just wanted to learn to ride every kind of board out there, and
Yeah.
I had when I left on my trip, I packed a longboard and 2 mid-lengths, and
Hmm.
my smaller mid-length was like 6'10" or something, and I called it my short board 'cause that's what I thought a
Yeah.
short board was, even though
Yeah.
it was, like, kind of rounded nose, like, fuller through the back and the nose, um but I had days where, like, duck diving was required, like, some of the places that I was surfing was, like, you just weren't going to get on the outside on a longboard, so I was trying to learn to
Yeah.
ride my shortboard, and yeah, I was sort of transitioning into that, but I always fell back on the longboard. Longboard is still where I feel most comfortable. So then when I got on a big wave board, everything just sort of clicked for me because I've always
Mm.
been the kind of athlete that is my athletic strengths are my power and my grit and my willingness to take a beating. My athletic weaknesses are my grace and yeah, the grace and the ability to flow. And this is how things show up in our lives too, right? Like how we surf is how we do anything. The macrocosm reflects the microcosm, so within, so without. And so, that's just my tendency is like, just try harder, just do it more, go bigger. So when I found big wave surfing, it was a matter of strength, stamina, and courage. Not as much grace was required, like to dance to the end of your longboard, or not as much flow to find your spot in the wave and hit the lip. All of that stuff is certainly important, but you also have to be big and physical um, to surf a big wave. And so that just it made sense for my body. I was a former women's American football player, so I played tackle football, and I was
Oh.
the soccer goalie. I was the basketball center. This is like the bigger and more brutal the position that was I was more suited for it. So yeah, it was kind of a natural transition to a big wave board for me.
That's so interesting. Like everything you just said, I can completely understand. And yeah, sort of drawing those parallels with life. I have to say, I really, I didn't start my surfing journey until I came to Australia. I mean, I'd tried it before, but not seriously until I came here. And I really wanted to transition to a shorter board. And same as you, I had sort of some mid lengths and tried to step down, but like with volume and what I found the hardest, and I don't have that background, that athletic background that you do. Um, and what I found was sort of taking off later where the face is steeper. It was almost a psychological thing more than a physical thing because when I was in that sort of peak surfing fitness, it was definitely pushing the conditions, like not big waves. I was never surfing big waves like you do, but knowing that I was physically fit enough to, I guess, handle myself in heavier waves and trying to challenge myself, to surf bigger waves. But yeah, I feel like it does take a certain kind of person to have the balls to just to go ahead and do it. And I think especially, I mean, I don't want to what's the word? I don't want to sort of pigeonhole like a female and male, but I do wonder maybe for some women that that kind of I don't want to say aggressiveness, but that sort of, I guess, yeah, to go out and push yourself. It's much easier. I found it was much easier just to sort of stay in my lane, stay on the longboard, stay with that sort of like small wave flow and just accept that instead of pushing, as you say, that you sort of challenged yourself and went hard.
I do think that aggressive is actually a fitting word. I don't want to say every big wave surfer is aggressive, but That's certainly a word that has been used to describe me as an athlete, and even as a person, I tend to be very, kind in relationships, but aggressive with the people I'm closest to, because that's actually my true nature, right? So, um, yeah, I do think that that was part of it, and I think there is a certain thing that big wave surfers are missing, that we are looking for out there in the ocean. Like, for me, I always dealt with a lot of anxiety, and that anxiety became extremely uncomfortable unless I was doing something, and doing something that was an achievement, not like something that was, making art that no one would ever see, or doing something recreationally. It was like I needed to be achieving something, whether it was in career or in sport. And I think, and this is just me being honest, I think my ego really loved the fact that you could measure how big the wave was. And it was very much, what's the word I'm looking for? It wasn't it was objective and not so subjective. It was like people could see me on a wave that was 10 feet, 12 feet. They could tell how big that wave was, versus you walked to the end of your nose and you spun around and you walked back. Like, how do you quantify that? And so my
Mhm.
ego really grabbed onto the fact that, like, oh, I could see my progress, and I could see how much bigger I was surfing, and I could quantify that. And I think that aggressive part of me really loved that. And I will say that, um, when I had my son, that killer instinct, it really changed. And I was forced to step into my feminine in a way that I did not understand previously. I had to be intuitive, soft, and slow, nurturing. And those things were at odds with my aggression and my anxiety. So it was a challenging transition, and it still is. It used to be, before I had my son, I would throw myself over the lip of anything, and it didn't matter. If someone behind me said go and I was in position and I had that confirmation in my head, okay, this is a good wave, I would go even if I was sure I was going to eat it. And a lot of times I did.
Oh my gosh. Like, I really, everything you just said, I can't relate to the big wave surfing, but those feelings, just going back to before you had your son, you were talking about having that anxiety. Do you feel like perhaps, challenging yourself mentally and physically to commit to that big wave and then sort of making it or not, do you think you're almost challenging that sort of internal anxiety, like sort of, I guess, overcoming it or trying to control it by, I don't know, like I feel maybe I would feel anxious going out in big surf or sort of like, looking over that like 10-foot drop, but then you do it and you commit and it's sort of like not letting that anxiety control you in a way.
Yeah, I
Or,
think that whenever we enter the ocean, we are agreeing to play with a power greater than ourselves.
mm,
And we're knowing that that power is always going to win. And so we are working within our own limitations to see how much we have inside of us, how much we can take on. And for a little kid or someone who doesn't know how to swim, it might be very scary just to put their feet in the ocean. And so for them, that's stretching their comfort zone. That's their big wave. And for someone else who, surfs casually, maybe surfing a head high wave is terrifying, but that's their stretch of the comfort zone. And I needed so much stimulation to get over that very strong feeling inside myself that I'm not good enough unless I'm achieving something. And
yeah.
life is unmanageable unless it's exciting. Falling apart exciting, or it's like pumping music at a discotheque at 2 a.m. exciting. And I didn't care whether it was the wipeout or it was the big wave, I needed something to calm that anxiety. And so I chose to play in the ocean at a level that was much greater than my comfort zone. I wasn't stretching my comfort zone a little bit. I was stretching my comfort zone to the limits. And when I became a mother, some of that need to find stimulation, it melted away because I had
Mm.
enough stimulation just trying to keep a child alive. Waking up every 30 minutes for a year straight, like that's brutal. And then, like, you're also tuning into this intuitive part of yourself that's like learning to speak an inaudible language, and you're, attuned to the needs of this little thing in a way that really, you know, it's it's magic. It's pure magic. And so I didn't need those sedatives. Like, really, the big waves were a sedative in a way. It
Yeah, wow.
it
Yeah.
was
Hmm.
calming my nerves, um, by bringing all this outside. It was like a distraction technique. And so I found it very challenging after he was born to pull the trigger on big waves. I'd be in a big wave situation. I knew my equipment was good. I knew my body was strong. Well, that changed too. So that was part of it. Like, oh, can I really still trust my body? But I knew my training was the same. Like, I had surfed those waves before dozens of times and of that same size. And yet I would be at that point, and there's this, you talk about that point where, like, on a short board where you have to take off kind of under the lip. Well, big waves are like that too, because there's so much water moving that really the only entry point most of the time is under the lip. And then often sometimes then it will soften out after you get in under the lip. Some waves don't, but I was mostly surfing that kind. So it's a vertical drop, but only for an instant, and then you get a little bit softer landing. But I would paddle, and at the last moment, I literally could not take that last paddle.
Yeah,
My
wow.
body was just like, no, you're not doing. So that was a lot for my ego to wrap its head around, that, like, now the accomplishment and the achievement was keeping a human alive. And it was thankless work, and it's not Instagram worthy work. And it's not even special. Like, I mean, most of the female population does it at one point or another in their life. And so it wasn't like I was doing this thing that, only 1% of women will ever do or something like that. It was like, wow, really? And yet it was the most rewarding. It still is. It's the most rewarding and transformative in the best possible way. It's pure alchemy, mothering.
Oh, do you know, like, honestly, it's really interesting hearing you articulate your experience. You're selling yourself short, okay? Like, parenting, yeah, parenting is so hard. Even though we all do it, everyone's journey is different, and you never know what cards you're going to be dealt with. But just that change in motherhood, it's really interesting. I shared with a guest recently, although I wasn't big wave surfing, I was kind of the same as you, sort of pre-kids, in that, I was surfing every day. I had a certain level of fitness. I was training, I was training before I go surfing. I'm training sort of for that functional fitness. And yeah, everything was about surfing, and I would go out in all conditions, sit out the back. I'd go out surfing on my own. I mean, there were people in the water, and I think you touched on it initially, that sort of core community that are sort of out for the dawn surf. But yeah, just like did just no real thought for my own personal safety. I mean, I was surfing within my limits, but still sort of pushing it. And then I had the kids, and like, there's something happened. And I was like, what is this? And even to this day, I get my ocean fix through the photography. And even now, it's almost, I have to have this exposure therapy because I have anxiety about sort of what might happen in open ocean, because of these little people. And yeah, it's really interesting. It's not something that I'm in control of. And I have to sort of challenge myself to sort of push past those feelings sometimes. It's very
I
interesting.
I think that is one of the reasons why we keep coming back, because we're not in any control. And it's this coming to terms with impermanence and coming to terms with our own mortality. It's like every time you enter the ocean, you are taking on risk.
Mhm.
And as a mother, I have found it very challenging to come to terms with my mortality. I remember this time in Mexico when I was there on a surf trip. There was a massive earthquake. I think it was 8.1 or something, and I was in this three-story brick building, and the floor was moving like 10 to 20 feet in each direction. It felt like being on like a swinging bridge or something. And I could hear the floor above me starting to cave in. The walls were caving in. And I could hear the bricks. It sounded like a freight train. The bricks were falling in. And I was standing there, like hands braced in this doorway, just certain that I was going to die. Like, absolutely certain. This is it. This is the last moment of my life. And I was at complete peace. I was like, I've lived a good life. I've done a lot of things. People will miss me, but it'll be okay. That was before I had my son. And at that point, I was driving around in an old beat up Toyota through cartel territory on my own. I mean, I had guns in my face. I bought gas from the cartel.
Oh my
It was
gosh.
gnarly what I was doing, and I loved it. I loved every moment of the risk. The riskier, the better. I was jumping on the back of motorcycles with people I didn't know and in the dark, barefoot with $3 in my pocket, like, just to go catch some better waves. Um, and that was wonderful, and that is so different now. I booked a surf trip, to Cabo a couple months ago, and I had it booked for like 4 hours. It was gonna go on my own and leave my son with his dad, and after 4 hours, I freaked out, and I was like, "I can't go to Mexico on my own, and what if something happens in the Mexican airline, and what if I get stuck there?" Totally changed right now because there's this thing, this person, this human depending on me, and so when I got diagnosed with cancer, um, stage 4 cancer, the life expectancy, the 5-year survival rate of people with my cancer is 17%. So what that means is people who have my cancer, 17% of them will still be alive after 5 years. So I feel like the ocean and its lessons and impermanence has been so helpful for me because my biggest fear has been that my son will not have memories of me. He was 2 when I was diagnosed. And now he's 5. He's old enough to have lasting memories. And still my biggest fear is he needs me. And I go into the ocean and what I see is when you surf with the old guys, it's always something like, "Oh, my shoulder, I can't paddle as well as I used to," or, "Oh, my back surgery, my pop-up's not what it used to be." And you hear all of these people with all of these excuses about why they're not surfing like they used to be, but the truth is that the youngest hotshot who's getting all the barrels and the sponsorship gigs and winning all the competitions, that person one day is also going to get old. And the waves are still going to be coming, and there's still going to be perfect little peaks and barrels all the way up and down the beach. And that person is going to stand on the beach with their coffee, unable to paddle out. And that day is coming for every single one of us. And I think the ocean teaches me that it is big enough for me to bring all of my pain. It's like, come on, baby, you really think I can't hold all that? Look how vast I am. You know, the ocean, it consumes something like 30% of the carbon dioxide that we as humans make through our cars and industry and all of our consumerism. And it just takes it. It just takes it and metabolizes it and alchemizes it and turns it into something beautiful. And it does that with our fear and our pain. And I have gone into the ocean terrified so many times, not just about cancer uh, and not just about the waves, but relationships or my kids, so many things. And you go in there And you come back out and like, okay, the ocean's always going to win. It's always bigger. There's always going to be a wave I can't surf. There's always going to be conditions that are too hard for me. And yet here I am. I'm still out there. I'm still doing it. I'm still getting something out of it. And I come out healed no matter what.
You are listening to One Breath Conversations Below the Surface with me, Katie Jackson. If you're loving our Blue Mind content, please consider subscribing to the show and sharing it with your ocean loving friends. I want to hear about all your stories, the barefoot on the motorbikes and everything. Before we talk about your cancer journey and that how the connection to the ocean has sort of helped you and supported you. Can we just rewind a little bit? Because when you were talking about how you, I guess, started surfing, you were talking about healing from an eating disorder. So it's sort of, I guess, the ocean gave you that healing from that part of your life when you were burnt out. You were talking about sort of a divorce, working in corporate, but and yeah, eating disorder. So can we sort of rewind back to there before we jump forward again?
Yeah, that is such a beautiful story because I had a fear since childhood that in order for me to be safe, I would need to marry well, marry a man who could take care of me. And in order for that to happen, I needed to look perfect. And I had, through my teenage years, it was like restriction and counting calories. And it was the early 2000s. Everyone was a waif. If you turned sideways, they disappeared. And I was athletic and I had a booty. Would have been great growing up now. Booties are all the rage, but that didn't work for me when I was a teenager. And so I was always trying to whittle myself down to fit some crazy, unrealistic beauty standard.
Mm.
Um, that turned into this like heavy keto. Like I was doing keto before keto was cool. And
Yeah.
I finally found success. Like my body finally got small. And when that happened, all of this attention from men started flooding in. And I was like, oh my goodness, I've done it. I've unlocked the secret. And so it fueled this need to go more and more. And what ended up happening was my digestive system got wrecked because you can't just eat meat and oil for years on end and not eat enough calories. So I started vomiting because my digestive system was so upset. But then something sort of this thing unlocked in my head that was like, oh, well, if I'm going to vomit anyway, I could just eat whatever I want.
Mm.
So it turned into bulimia and I was like a starved animal. Like when you're a starved animal, my cat, she doesn't like her food right now. And I found a dead bird, right? She ate a bird recently. I got to get her some better food. Anyway,
Yeah, lucky.
when you are a starved animal, you will find a way to feed yourself, and that's what my body was doing, but then I was
Mm.
terrified that I was gonna gain weight, so it turned into bulimia. And so it was really this very disempowered place where I didn't feel like I could take care of myself, and I felt like I needed someone to take care of me. I needed someone to validate me. I needed love, attention, affection in order to be a worthwhile human being. When I started surfing, I was getting those little bits of hits of attention because now I found a sport I could do in my bikini, right? And it was, but on the other side of that, I was getting this validation from within myself of like, wow, look at this hard thing. This is learning to surf is super hard, especially as an adult. And I was like, wow, today I did like marginally better than yesterday. And I was starting to build this self confidence. So when I decided to throw everything away and just travel to Mexico, at that time, I was teaching yoga and personal training, and I was also keto coaching. So I was helping people to lose weight, all while suffering from bulimia in secret.
Wow. Mm.
And I knew because I wanted to be out of it so bad. I was attending 12-step meetings And I was working with a therapist and a sponsor and reading all the books. And I didn't want to have this addiction. Yet I couldn't stop myself. I would go to the cupboard and shove food in my face until I was numb. So my mind was ready to quit, but I knew that I needed to eat intuitively. That was going to be the answer, which meant that I was going to have to eat whatever sounded good, as much of it as sounded good. And I knew for a while that while my body was finding its equilibrium, I was going to gain weight. And that terrified me because I didn't want to be a fraud. I was already a fraud, but I thought if I was fat, then I was truly a fraud. So
Mm.
that's when I left everything behind. And I remember crossing the border into Mexico and like getting a whole fried fish with the head on. And then noticing that people around me were ordering these tacos and they'd eat a few tacos and then they would order again and order more tacos and they'd eat those and then they'd order again. And like three times they were ordering at the same restaurant. And I was like, it changed so much of my perspective on like what normal human eating can look like. So, because there was nobody who knew me, I felt free to put on weight if that's what my body needed, and it needed it. And the pendulum had to swing the other way for a while, and I had to get heavier than I had ever been. Um, while at the same time, I was starting to surf these bigger and bigger waves and more challenging waves, and realizing that not only was I still surfing, my body was bigger, but it was still able to surf. I was actually surfing better because I had more strength. I
Mm.
wasn't so depleted. I could surf longer. I could learn more
Yeah.
because I was out in the water for a longer period of time. And then I also realized that the attention and affection from men actually never had anything to do with my body because that didn't change at all. It still kept coming. Now I was in this Latin country where women with curves are very revered. So the whole thing was like this divine conspiracy to put me in a place where I could heal. And the more I surfed, the more my confidence in myself grew. And the more my confidence in myself grew, the more I was able to lean into intuitive eating. I began to trust my body. And this was a huge act of rebellion because I grew up in a culture that said bodies are evil and only God can redeem our bodies. And any urge, especially sexual urges that come from your body, is wrong. That's from Satan. And so if I had the urge to eat, clearly that was my body messing up. It was my sinful nature. And so now for the first time, I started trusting that because I started trusting myself in the water. I started seeing what I was capable of. I started getting in situations where you could die. I remember getting sucked out. I was paddling out alongside this jetty, and then before I knew it, I was 200 yards out of position and floating out to sea and paddling against a rip. And I just remember I had the strength to get myself in that day, and I would not have had I been in my eating disorder. And I remember telling myself, you can panic when your feet hit the sand, but right now you got to stay calm. And I
Right.
got all the way to the sand and I threw my board and I melted down, but I had done it. And the confidence that I gained from that moment was huge. And that moment repeated itself. The more I began to put myself in more and more dangerous situations in the ocean, the more my confidence grew. And it was like, if I can do that out in the ocean, there is some sort of power in me that is beautiful and that has the power to save me from my addiction and my eating disorder. And I leaned into that power and I learned to trust. And I ended up getting the confidence to live on nothing but cookies for 3 months. And that's all I wanted to eat. I loved these peanut butter chocolate chip oatmeal cookies. I couldn't get enough of them. And sometimes I didn't even bake them. I just ate the dough. And it was
Yeah.
3 months straight. And I remember waking up one morning and the cookies tasted like dust. And I was just like, I'm done. I gave them all away to my neighbor. I didn't eat that day until evening because I wasn't hungry until evening. And then I had a bowl of rice with broccoli because that's what sounded good. And over the next 3 months, all of the weight that I had gained over the past 3 years, learning to trust my body, it all fell off without any effort. And I went back to an equilibrium that I have stayed at ever since. And I really do feel like it was the confidence that I gained in myself from the waves that gave me the confidence to trust my body to fully lean in and listen to what my body needed so I could heal.
Ugh, I wish I could go back and give you a cuddle. I feel like there's so much more focus now, I think, for young girls, for women to focus on strength and functionality rather than appearance and the sort of representation of all kinds of body types and thank goodness. So what you were just saying about learning to trust your body, if we can jump forward, and obviously only share what you feel comfortable, but how did you cope with the cancer journey that you've been on when you sort of learned to trust your body and you're obviously training and perhaps at peak physical fitness to then face challenges with your health?
Yeah, it took less than 1 second when I realized that this was going to be a cancer diagnosis. It took less than 1 second for me to get excited, and in a good way, because I knew that this was going to be the biggest wave of my life.
Yeah.
And whether I was going to wipe out and die or I was going to ride it and kick out the end clean, it didn't matter because it was going to be such an amazing ride. And the reason I was excited about my cancer diagnosis was because I could look back at the eating disorder as well as a major back injury I had suffered. And I could see this golden thread of redemption running through both of those awful tragedies that I had to go through. I could see that without the eating disorder and without the back injury, I would not have half the strength that I had. I would not have evolved into the human that I am. And for me, personal growth is one of my highest values. And the lessons that I learned from going through those two things made me so much stronger. So I knew that cancer was my body's way of getting my attention. In the same way that hunger, so I learned this when I was going through my eating disorder. If you have to pee, you don't say, I shouldn't have to pee. I don't deserve to pee. I didn't drink enough water to earn the right to pee. But if you're hungry, you might say that. Like, does it make sense that I'm hungry right now? Why would I be hungry? I didn't do much today. I've already eaten enough. But they're the same urge. It's your body telling you it needs something. And after I healed from my eating disorder, I began coaching women with disordered eating who needed to learn that the disordered eating, whether it's binging or under eating, is your body's way of giving you something. It is adaptive. It is telling you that you have a problem inside you, and I'm going to give you food because you're not strong enough to deal with that problem. And I remember this moment when I was at my heaviest weight. I looked down and I saw my thighs, and I realized that my fat thighs were carrying all of the emotions that I did not have the strength to feel at that time. The guilt and the anxiety and the shame. I couldn't handle feeling those emotions, so my body converted those into hunger, distracted me with hunger until I had the strength to sit with those emotions and work through them. And I believe that every illness in the human body is a warning light, but it's not the real problem. It's an alert that we need to open the hood and discover what's going on underneath. So when cancer showed up, that belief was already cemented into me. And I knew cancer was only a warning light. And I was so grateful that it had showed up so that I could make the changes in my life, the spiritual and mental changes, breaking these ancestral patterns. Whether or not I'm able to accomplish all of that before I die, I don't know. But I do know that what I'm going to drag with me into the afterlife is going to be a lot less. And what I'm going to pass on to my child is going to be a lot.
That's so powerful. It's so powerful. Yeah, this is incredible. And so something that really inspires me is your seemingly ability to you're traversing this journey, but you're prioritizing health, like you say, personal growth, um, and still getting out in the water and motherhood. And I feel like, a stage 4 diagnosis would crush so many people, and it would be hard to maintain. And not to say, I'm sure you have some challenging times and some sort of dark moments, but I feel from the outside you seem to be traveling this journey as you've traveled through your life, and just keeping yourself physically fit, and doing all of the things that you love, and doing all of these amazing things with your son.
Yeah, I feel that you don't know what you're capable of until you go through it. And for me, I have just had to put one foot in front of the other. And yeah, there's been a lot of horrible days. Sometimes I have to do what I call a controlled burn when I feel that the sorrow, the rage, the grief, the fear, it's building up to a head. I have to put on the music that brings out the tears and go to a safe place. And, it might look like an exorcism is going on. I'm wailing and screaming and hitting things, and I just have to let it out. And there are days when I don't want to be here at all, especially when I'm in the really strong chemo. I'm still in chemo, but it's a different kind and the side
Yep.
effects aren't as bad. um, but I've had 3 occurrences of cancer in the last 3 years. And so the first 2, I've had to do chemo infusions, and there are always a couple of days after each chemo infusion where depression is heavy and it, like, hangs around me like a thick cloud of smoke. And it's a real challenge to sit with that. And for me, it's this being forced to be still, to be indoors, to be in the AC, to lay down, to watch shows, to not accomplish anything, to just be, um, while the ocean roars outside my window. Like, honestly, that takes more strength than going out and surfing. And then that desire to be in the ocean and to be moving is so strong that it is pulling me out of that depression. It cannot last long. By like day 3, I'm like, I don't care how crappy I feel. I am tired of feeling this way. And I am getting in that ocean. And, sometimes it's on a boogie board. Sometimes it's free diving. It's whatever. Sometimes I'm just floating. Sometimes I'm just body surfing the shore pound. But my motto has been through this whole thing, find a way to modify and keep going. And then because I've kept going, there are days that I have had the strength and I have paddled out and I have gotten waves, and sometimes they have been waves of significance. And those are the days that's like all of that hard work pays off, because I'm telling you, after I dropped my kid off at 8 a.m., and this is the first year he's in school. So the last 2 years, it was like paying a babysitter to be able to have any time to sleep, to meditate, to work out. All of that I had to pay, $20 an hour to get a surf session. But those sacrifices, running sprints on the beach until I'm nauseated and dry heaving, or, sprint paddling around a buoy racing other women, and feeling this like asthma start to close in on my lungs. That pain, when you push through that, on the other side of that is strength. And when you get to capitalize on that strength on those days when, the waves are double overhead and beautiful, and I actually get to go out and I actually get to ride one of those monsters, like even just sit in the lineup next to the people who are riding those monsters, that is when all of that training pays off. And that's just the tangible reward. The intangible reward is that when my kid gets home from school, I have the energy to play Legos with him, to take him to the beach, to go on a bike ride. And I'm actually in a good mood because I still have energy and strength. And I get to enjoy these moments with my child that aren't likely to last much longer for any of us who are parents. Like,
Hmm.
my kid is still young enough that he's in this magic phase. I've been this is horrible. I've been convincing him that there's a monkey living, above our house and that like, when he's not looking, I'll just, like, toss a banana across the room, and so we have this running joke that there's this monkey. He even named him, and he, like, told his teacher about him, but it's like he's still, like, in this magical phase where, like, monkeys can live in houses, and it's so beautiful. Anything is possible, and that is going to end. There is going to come a day where I will pick that kid up and I will set him down and I will never pick him up again. And that day is going to come for every parent. And I have the strength to enjoy those moments, to not live in that fog of depression because I have pushed through and because the ocean has pulled me through.
I feel like it's really easy for us to all get bogged down with life and all have those hard days. But I wonder if your enjoyment is to prioritize the things that matter, and consequently, perhaps living a fuller life because of it in between the treatments.
Yeah, it's crazy is I don't really work that much anymore. I used to work a lot. I was constantly working and I'm still working on projects that I really love. I'm working on a memoir right now. I'm like writing furiously and memoir writing it's a lot of self-work. You've really got to be honest with yourself and you really in order for the memoir to be any good you have to change because you have to show character development, right? So i I'm working on that, but that doesn't pay any bills. And I'm a body worker. I still do massage therapy and they still teach yoga, but a couple times a week. And it's interesting the way my priorities have shifted because I've always lived in fear that there's not enough, that I won't have enough money, and that if you want money, you have to trade your time and your energy for money. And I don't know how it works because I'm a single mom. I don't get a lot of help from my son's other parent, but somehow, as I prioritize my joy, as I prioritize the desires of my heart, everything else falls in line. So I have like a list of priorities, and that's like having a clean space. Um, and as a mom, the clutter just accumulates. Like that's a good 20% of your day is just decluttering all the time. So like that's top on my priority list. That makes me really happy to live in a clean space. And then exercise, time in the ocean, and then time to do spiritual work where either whether it's meditation or writing or yoga or prayer, these are my priorities when I'm away from my son. And when my son is home at mid afternoon, there are no more priorities. It's just him. It's like, what does he need? And if he happens to be occupied playing Legos, okay, I can work on something else. That's fine. And if it happens to fit into my schedule, someone wants a massage and I can fit it in, great. I do love doing body work. It's wonderful. And I love my one yoga class a week that I teach. And I love my group and the community and all of that. But somehow, as I have prioritized the things that really bring me joy, I have slowly plugged all of these little energetic leaks. It was like, I was this glass of water with little pinpricks all over, and I was giving my energy away to all of these people and situations that really didn't, I didn't need to be. And as I said more no's and set more boundaries, then I had more energy for myself. And money is just another form of energy. And I put myself in this place where energy was flowing to me. Money is flowing to me. and no, I'm not rich, and but somehow all the bills are paid. And that's just the divine order of things.
You are such an inspiration, and how it's insane that it's taken the cancer diagnosis to for you to create these priorities and create this beautiful life that you have. You spoke about the memoir that you're writing. I would love to share all of your details in the show notes. So, is that something? I can imagine. I can only imagine from the chats that we've had today how many chapters that memoir is going to be. And I can imagine how challenging it must be to include all of those adventures that you've been on. But yeah, if you can sort of share more about how we can follow you and sort of learn more about your journey and support you and your son.
Sure. So my website right now is just my name, melanieezell.com. And that focuses on my work that I do with coaching with women who have issues with eating disorders, overeating. The best way to get in touch with me through to know more about my writing is on my Instagram. I do share a lot of writing on my Instagram, and I do have a newsletter that I send out with newsletter is kind of the wrong word. It's more like blogs that go out on an email list, and it's just reflections of my cancer journey, what I'm learning through this journey. And of course, that's the best way to stay up to date for anything that's coming out with the book. I imagine the actual writing of it will be done in the next 6 months, and then let's see how long it takes. This is my third major book that I have written, but I've only self published. So let's see what happens. If I self publish, that's great, and if someone wants to pick it up, that's great. And I do have a lot of stories to share, so I'm hoping this is only the first of many memoirs that I'm able to write.
Read it all. There's just not enough time to cover everything in this podcast today. I'm so grateful for your time and yeah, for sharing your story. Do you have do you feel like the way where you're living now in Hawaii, do you have a community of people supporting you and through the ocean and the lifestyle that you've created?
Yeah, definitely. It was challenging at first when I first came here. There are here on the North Shore, there are a lot of young people that are influencers and pro surfers, and it was hard to feel like I fit in. But once I became a mother, there's this amazing, nurturing community of parents of young children um, that have really taken me in, and we're all water people. We just had the Menehune
Wow.
surf contest, and the whole community comes out and the kids surf, and there's like hundreds of kids getting pushed into waves or paddling in on their own. And then on the final day, they all get a trophy and they're all wearing the same t shirt and the same hat. And it's like all of these parents that are just jostling to take pictures, but you know them all. They're all your friends and neighbors. So it is amazing that I have that. I did do some of my chemo in Michigan where my family is. And that's awesome too, because I have the option of being in Michigan, being with my family, spending time with them. I have great doctors there if I need more help. And right now, I'm just so grateful to God, grateful to Source that I'm in a really good place where, yeah, I'm tired and yeah, I have side effects and I get occasional nausea and but we're all dealing with something. I'm not special in that regard, and I'm able to function with, the help of my wonderful neighbor who will pick up my kid if I've got a doctor's appointment, or the woman down the road that I can send my kid to when I need to get some work done and he can go play with her kids. And it's actually a wonderful community here.
It sounds amazing. I'm just so grateful to you for your time, for sharing your story. And I think there's so many lessons that can inspire us all. As I said, the motivation for this podcast is talking about how the ocean can transform us and shape our identity. And I think your story is testament to that. And testament to how your connection to the ocean has enabled you to work through all of the challenges in your life.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a fun conversation.
Yeah, I feel like I could talk to you for so long. You've been listening to One Breath Conversations Below the Surface with me, Katie Jackson. I'm so grateful to Melanie for sharing so openly about big waves, motherhood, cancer, and the way the ocean keeps holding her through it all. If Melanie's story moved you, please hit follow, leave a review, and share this episode with a friend who loves the ocean and needs a reminder of their own strength. We're almost at the end of our first series, only 2 more episodes before Christmas. So stick around, there's more Blue Mind magic to come. Next time on One Breath, I sit down with Sydney freediver and former tech professional, Janice Sue. Janice grew up watching The Little Mermaid, spent a decade in a high-pressure corporate role, and now has quit her 9 to 5 to follow her inner mermaid and train as a freediving instructor. We talk about why freediving is not just for super athletes, how time underwater can calm a busy mind, and the powerful way the ocean builds resilience, community, and a completely new sense of identity. If you've ever thought about quitting your 9 to 5, then this conversation might just change your life. Follow the show so you do not miss it.